Right, let's jump straight into this explainer and explore one of the most infamous patches of ocean on the entire planet. It's a place literally synonymous with vanishing ships, doomed flights, and honestly, a whole century of whispers and rumors. You've definitely heard the name, and you probably know the spooky reputation that comes with it. We are, of course, talking about the Bermuda Triangle, or as it's often more menacingly called, the Devil's Triangle. Today, we're going to put the spooky stories aside and look strictly at the facts, the history, and the cold, hard science to separate the myth from the reality.
So, geographically speaking, where exactly is this place? We're talking about a loosely defined zone over in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean. The classic boundaries basically anchor this region at three very specific points. You've got Miami, Florida on the U.S. coast, the island of Bermuda up to the north, and San Juan, Puerto Rico down to the south.
And the sheer scale of this area is, well, it's almost incomprehensible. Depending on whose exact definition you're using, this massive expanse covers anywhere from 1.3 to a staggering 3.9 million square kilometers of open water. And it's within this massive footprint that hundreds of people, gigantic cargo ships, and entire squadrons of aircraft have simply vanished without a trace, leaving absolutely no wreckage behind.
Which brings us to the ultimate question we're trying to answer today, right? What is actually lurking out there in the Devil's Triangle? When a massive ship just vanishes into thin air, are we looking at paranormal phenomena, alien interventions, maybe some sort of interdimensional rift? Or is there a much more grounded and perhaps even more terrifying reality involving simple human error and the totally untamed power of nature?
Section 1. Birth of a Myth. Let's look at how this legend actually began.
Because the thing is, this legend didn't just pop up overnight. It really compounded over centuries. It literally starts with early European explorers, kind of lays dormant for hundreds of years, and then absolutely explodes in the 20th century through sensational media. It really kicked off in 1950 when an Associated Press article first pointed out a supposed pattern of missing ships. Then jumped to 1964, and a writer named Vincent Gaddis officially coined the catchy term Bermuda Triangle in a pulp magazine called Argosy. Fast forward a decade to 1974, and Charles Berlitz publishes a blockbuster book that sold millions of copies. That book is what really cemented the supernatural legend globally.
But, the actual unease surrounding these waters is ancient. Even Christopher Columbus reported some really eerie phenomena as he sailed these very waters way back in October 1492. His logbook actually describes a strange flickering light on the horizon, a, quote, marvelous flame of fire crashing into the sea, and some completely inexplicable compass malfunctions that absolutely terrified his crew. Now, Columbus ultimately chalked these up to natural curiosities, but it definitely planted the very first seeds of the area's dark reputation.
Moving on to Section 2, the iconic disappearances, the tragedies at sea.
The true foundation of this myth really rests on a few deeply tragic, high-profile cases. The most famous by far is Flight 19. Back in December 1945, 5 Navy TBM Avenger bombers just vanished during a routine training mission off the coast of Florida. The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, became hopelessly disoriented. He reported over the radio that his compasses were completely malfunctioning and he had no idea where they were. And to make a terrible tragedy even worse, a PBM Mariner rescue plane that was sent out to find them actually exploded in midair. So in a single day, 27 men were just swallowed by the Atlantic.
And we certainly can't forget the maritime disasters either. In 1918, a massive 542-foot Navy collier ship called the USS Cyclops vanished without a single distress call with over 300 souls aboard. It was carrying a heavy cargo of manganese. To this day, it remains the greatest loss of life in U.S. Navy history outside of combat. Then you have the Marine Sulphur Queen, a tanker carrying molten sulfur that just disappeared in 1963 with 39 crew members, likely due to bad weather or structural failure. These aren't just spooky campfire stories. They are immense, real human tragedies that provided the raw material for the whole myth.
Section 3. Paranormal Theories and Pseudoscience. So, faced with these sudden, totally inexplicable losses, human imagination just ran wild. You had proponents like Edgar Cayce suggesting that sunken energy crystals from the lost city of Atlantis were down there firing rogue energy beams and scrambling the ship's electrical systems. I mean, wow. Others firmly believed in underwater alien bases orchestrating UFO abductions. And then, of course, there were theories of electronic fog, this supposed bizarre meteorological anomaly that acts like a time tunnel or an interdimensional portal, literally transporting ships right out of our reality.
But let's shift gears now to Section 4, the science of the sea.
What are the actual oceanographic realities here?
When you strip away all the pulp fiction, how does a paranormal claim actually hold up against real Earth science? Well, the myth claims Atlantean crystals scramble compasses. But the scientific reality? This region has historically been home to something called the agonomic line. This is a very real, shifting magnetic zone where true north and magnetic north perfectly align. If an inexperienced pilot or sailor relies purely on an unadjusted magnetic compass in this zone, they can experience disastrous navigational errors, straying hundreds of miles off course. Actually, that's almost certainly what happened to Flight 19.
Furthermore, the entire western boundary of the triangle is dominated by the Gulf Stream. Think of the Gulf Stream as a torrential, massive, underwater river flowing right on the surface of the ocean. It moves incredibly fast, at speeds up to 9 kilometers per hour. So, if a plane crashes or a boat capsizes, this incredibly swift current can rip the wreckage apart and carry the evidence hundreds of miles away before a rescue team even has time to launch their boats. It literally acts like a giant eraser, wiping away the scene of the tragedy.
And then you have to add in the terrifying natural anomalies. Deep beneath the surface there, you'll find vast deposits of methane hydrates. If an underwater landslide triggers a massive release of this gas, it violently bubbles to the surface, drastically reducing the density of the water. A ship caught right above this would instantly lose its buoyancy and drop like a stone. Though, to be fair, there's no evidence of this happening super recently. But combine possibilities like that with the region's propensity for sudden, violent hurricanes and massive 30-meter rogue waves, you have an environment that is perfectly capable of destroying large vessels in seconds. Absolutely no aliens required.
Which brings us to Section 5, a manufactured mystery, debunking the triangle.
The real hero of this story is a research librarian named Larry Kusch. Back in 1975, he got pretty tired of the sensationalism, so he meticulously checked the original naval records, newspaper archives, and weather reports for these supposed mysterious vanishings. And what he found was just astonishing. He discovered that many authors had blatantly fabricated details, entirely ignored the fact that ships sank during documented incredibly severe hurricanes, or, get this, they even included ships that actually sank in the Pacific Ocean thousands of miles away.
You also really have to remember the context here. The waters between Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda constitute one of the busiest shipping and commercial flight lanes on the entire planet. When you account for the sheer massive volume of daily traffic passing through here, the number of accidents and disappearances is actually completely normal. Mathematically speaking, it is no more dangerous than any other heavily trafficked body of water.
In fact, if you want to know the real truth, just follow the money. Look at this number, 0. That is exactly how many extra insurance premiums are charged by major maritime insurers like Lloyd's of London to cross this area. They look at the raw data and they see absolutely 0 extra risk. Furthermore, there are exactly 0 official danger zones recognized by the U.S. government or the Coast Guard in this region. To the professionals whose lives depend on navigating it daily, the triangle simply does not exist.
As Larry Kusch famously concluded after his exhaustive research, the entire phenomenon was built on poor research, media sensationalism, and a deeply ingrained human desire for a good story. It's quite literally a manufactured mystery, repeated so many times over the decades that it simply took on the illusion of truth. Which leaves us with a final, slightly provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. If the data is so clear, why does the myth endure? Why is it that we would so much rather believe in ancient curses, Atlantis, and alien portals than accept a much more sobering truth? Perhaps it's because it's just deeply, deeply unsettling to admit that despite all our advanced technology, a simple human error, combined with the terrifying, untamed power of the ocean, is still more than enough to erase us without a trace.